Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Ricci from ISINNOVA in Italy. We are coordinating the Rebalance project, which is the project responsible for organizing, among other events, this series of conversations or dialogues on a series of themes that we have identified in previous work as being crucial and particularly relevant in the broader discussion about mobility culture and mobility values affecting the future of mobility as we know it. I'm pleased to welcome two panelists today, and which I'd like to introduce right away before we enter into the discussion itself. So Benjamin Docquir is an expert in intellectual property and technology law, with the stated special passion for technology and innovation, and trying to apply traditional legal concepts with a future-oriented perspective. He is an expert and a specialist in data privacy and all issues revolving around big data, artificial intelligence, data ownership, you name it. He also serves as an academic associate with the ULB in Brussels, and he's a partner of Osborne Clarke, where he heads the Department of Intellectual Property, IT, and Data. His challenge there is to help mitigate the risks associated with digitalization at large. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you, Andrea.
Xavier Tackoen has started his professional life with 10 years in the academic sector, working in both research and training at the Université Libre de Bruxelles. He now works, and for the past 12 years, for Espaces-Mobilités, Brussels-based consultancy specialized in transport strategies, new mobility services, and public space design. And his specific fields of expertise include mobility as a service, shared and connected and autonomous vehicles, and of course an extensive knowledge also of the problematics associated to public transport. So welcome, Xavier.
Thank you, Andrea. Hello to everyone.
Just a couple of sentences for those of you who are not familiar with the Rebalance project. Rebalance is a project funded under Horizon 2020 and is a foresight project. So it takes a forward-looking approach to explore, investigate, and discuss all items related to mobility culture. I would like to stress the fact that this is certainly not the first foresight project that deals with transport and mobility. There have been many out there, many of them also extremely interesting and enriching. The Rebalance, however, has a challenge of originality, which is that we want to go beyond what is the usual focus of transport foresight, which concentrates on, well, of course, technologies, but also on behaviors as the immediate determinants of people choices. We are trying, and this is our main challenge, to dig deeper and I would say upstream with respect to the behavioral patterns, and trying to investigate and explore values and the cultural determinants that end up by shaping up the behaviors. Cultural aspects and values which are often not explicit, maybe even held somehow unknowingly by transport users, but which represent the real origin of how mobility is then deployed. And this is our main challenge, to try and understand those and explore them and see what the future can reserve to us if these values and these cultural features would be modified and reshaped. Within this general framework, Rebalance has a number of activities, research and stakeholders consultation, among which a series of 5 exploratory conversations. This is the second of the series. We had an interesting discussion last week about one of the specific aspects of digitalization, which is connected and automated vehicles, driverless vehicles. There will be 3 more every coming Thursday, and just take the opportunity to encourage all of you who are online today to follow us up on the website in case you would be interested in listening in also in future sessions. Very briefly, some housekeeping. The audience is listening in, as I said, which means that they will not be able to take the floor directly. However, I'm sure you can see on the menu of your Zoom screen the option of asking questions, and we'll be happy to take them up to the extent that the time allows it. We have incidentally until no later than 5:30, so that's our time frame. Let me now briefly introduce today's theme, which is very broadly worded digitalization, vaste programme, would say the French-speaking people. The rationale behind our interest in this is clearly that mobility services in general, whether we're talking about passengers or freight or goods transport, are quite obviously and clearly increasingly relying on ICT, on information communication technology, and on solutions that exploit technological innovation in this area. And again, the general belief and expectation, I would say, is that these digital developments are expected to improve and increase a number of things, among others, economic efficiency of the transport sector in general, but also, and importantly, safety, environmental performance of transport services and transport system, and also not marginally help achieve the much advocated goal of offering and experiencing seamless travel. So, but our main question today is whether these expectations, which have been built up over the past years and to some extent already materialized in what we are witnessing and experiencing today, whether these are somehow a clear and unchallenging perspective for the future, or whether provocatively we might be somehow underestimating or ignoring obstacles and unwanted, undesired implications of the diffusion of ICT in the transport sector, such as typically the loss of privacy, but also a decrease in the opportunities for people to interact socially, and maybe even the potential widening of specific inequalities among various social groups, and with the ultimate result that this would finally leave some people behind. So this is our frame for discussion today. Let me now immediately start to query our 2 panelists about the first issue that I would like to discuss today. There's a lot of not only discussion, but I would say it has almost already become a political mantra to say that we must pursue the so-called twin transition, whereby we simultaneously, in parallel, and hopefully with synergies, aim for a transition in environmental performance of particularly the transport sector, and at the same time its digitalization. So this is something which is kind of a buzzword now, the twin transition, widespread policy mantra, I would call it. Now, specifically in the transport sector, there are indeed obvious synergies between these 2 dimensions of the transition, the digital and the green one. But my question is, are there also potential challenges in trying to combine the 2 and making the most of these 2 transitions? which call for an effort in identifying and negotiate maybe trade-offs or compensations. And say very much related to this, especially considering that our interest in understanding what moves people in making specific choices, when it comes to actually leveraging individual motivations, but even collective motivations to take up and promote more sustainable means of transport, do you think it's potentially more effective to build upon the efficiency of digital solutions or upon the environmental aspirations, which is raising together with the general increase in awareness and in concerns? So that would be my first query for the two of you. And I don't know, Benjamin, would you like to start?
Yes, happy to start. Thank you for the invitation, first of all, and for this first question. I have a quick answer. I'm not sure it's the right one, but let's try it. I believe that digitalization is a process. It can help to achieve certain purposes, whereas sustainability and environmental concerns, in my view, are an objective. It's something we should aim at in the common interest. So I would rather say that there is a hierarchy between the two, and that digitalization is good to the extent that it allows to achieve more sustainability or greener transportation, or maybe suppress the need to travel a lot because travel goes together with carbon emissions, for instance. That would be my let's say my gut feeling about that. But I think it's important to stress that digitalization in itself is not an objective, it's not a goal. You don't digitalize just for the sake of it. You do it because you want to automate processes, you want to cut the costs. That's mainly the drivers between within companies and business organizations, or even beyond the circle of business. Whereas sustainability and green transportation or lower carbon emissions, it's something we have to achieve.
Yeah, well, can I just immediately react to that before giving the floor to Xavier? I can only agree with this hierarchical view, but my question would be, do you think that this hierarchy, this distinction between means and goal is reflected in the industrial strategies, in the behavior of people, in the perception of people? Or don't you have the feeling that sometimes as it has happened in other areas, like, you know, iPhone for the fun of it, digitalization becomes some kind of goal per se, that is encouraged or even forcefully pushed by business interests who might have a very clear goal of maximizing the diffusion of the innovative products. So that's my concern. So I can only agree with the theoretical hierarchy that you have put forward. As in Rebalance, we're talking about what moves people. So is this reflected in the behavior and in the choices and in the strategies of individuals, of industry, of companies, of governments? Is that clear for everybody?
I would say that may not be the case, indeed, that this hierarchy is reflected in the reality. I believe technology and digitalization is always very attractive. It looks nice, it's innovative, it's something that also appeals to the younger people. They want to do it because it's new in some way, it's working like that. And indeed, businesses are pushing their business interests, which is understandable, and they try to sell products and services as much as possible. But that is no agenda for the common good, in my personal opinion, at least. I don't know, maybe Xavier, you want to?
Yes, Xavier, your go.
Yes, thank you. I could have been very quick because I fully agree with what Benjamin said. So digitalization is a mean, environment, sustainability is the goal. But I think there's something missing, because what motivates people actually is neither digitalization or environment. If you look at surveys like, let's say, cyclists in Copenhagen, none of those cyclists has changed his behavior because of the environment, but because of social aspects, but actually it's very efficient to cycle. This is why people embrace cycling in those cities. And I think digitalization is really important to spare resources. It can be financial resources, it can be human resources. And actually we absolutely need that people behind a desk at a train station should concentrate on giving an advice and not in selling tickets, because it has no added value of selling a ticket. You can go to the ticket machine and it goes straight. But what's the added value is that people, human, can give advice. And I think it's very important, because if we want to achieve environmental goals, we should not talk too much about the environment. This is really something I believe, because I work a lot in awareness, working at company level, at neighborhood level. And what motivates people is, okay, I want my life to be easier in the future. I want it I want to really master my mobility. And to make sure that you can master the mobility, if you don't own and use a car, which can be very flexible, which is not anymore as flexible as in the past, but remains flexible, you need some tools. And those tools can be apps, can be digital tools, but it's not enough, because any time an app will tell you, okay, take the metro and then jump on a kick scooter, you will say, yes, okay, I know what's the metro, but I've never tried a kick scooter, so it's not giving me the right information. The first thing we need to do is, okay, let's educate people about getting on a kick scooter. How does it work? Is it dangerous? What are the safety measures? How do you ride a kick scooter? Once the people are educated, are trained, then the digitalization will help, saying, okay, yes, this time, of course, it's getting much faster if I take the metro and then I jump on my kick scooter instead of waiting for the bus. And this is very important, I think. First, we need to change people, their behavior, by awareness, by training, and then we can get the full power of digitalization. This is my opinion on this.
Okay, so let me put it bluntly, maybe a little bit provocatively. So to the second part of my question, where I was asking whether it would be more effective to, leverage individual and collective motivations in the direction of making the most of the efficiency of digital innovation versus being able to count on their increased environmental awareness. Your answer would be the former, not the latter. So it would
definitely the former.
If we had to make, a cut and dried answer, which is never the case, of course. But if I had to ask you to pick one of the two and only one, you would definitely say that it's easier to have people change their habits and maybe even their beliefs by relying on the promise of higher efficiency as provided, hopefully, by new technologies and digitalization, right? Did I understand correctly?
Yes, definitely. The former is better, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Digitalization is one of the tools that we have, one of the means, but definitely environmental concerns is a goal.
Benjamin, you'd like to comment?
Oh, I would agree with that, but I was only going to say that to take a concrete example, maybe you can have an app that tells you it's more efficient to go this way from point A to point B, and you will also use more environmental friendly means of transportation if you do so. But then you have to believe in what the app is telling you. So I'm just saying, I fully concur with the idea that individuals are motivated individually and not collectively. So they may have a sense of you know, the importance of the environment, and they may have some awareness, but there is always the challenge of how can I be sure that, well, the app is telling me that this is better to do that way, but how can I be sure? I think what is going to make my decision is how efficient and quick it can be for me to go point A to point B, period. That there's no, I believe there is no other consideration. When I'm talking about practical stuff, like I need to get it home before 6 p.m. or I need to get at school to pick up the kids or stuff like that, you just need to be efficient, right?
Okay, well, following, I think, quite directly on this first exchange, I think let me try to go a little bit deeper in, because we're not here to discuss technologies as such, but of course we're interested in understanding what is the actual role of technologies and whether these expectations that have been built are fully justified and will deliver what has been promised. So, you know, smart working, online shopping, and everything else that has to do with the virtual and e-life solutions. They are increasingly promoted as being directly instrumental and beneficial to sustainability. Though that's what we hear all the time, irrespective of what we just said, that maybe it's not the best leverage point, but that's what we hear all the time, including, of course, increased safety and so on. But there start to be, and maybe more than start, a number of queries and critical questions being raised about whether this is truly and really delivering what we would like to deliver. For instance, one of the questions is about just-in-time. Just-in-time was very fashionable a few years ago. Everybody considered that this was a major improvement in management, and eliminating dead time, dead space, optimizing resources, optimizing warehousing, and so on and so forth. Now we hear increasing a number of very, very strong voices saying that this is madness, that just-in-time is really something that we should forget about it. Even in one of the talks that we had previously within the Rebalance project, I think it was Carlo Noé, who said, let's just forget about just-in-time. This is bad. It's not good for sustainability. It's good for the profits of a certain number of industries, hopefully for them. But in terms of environment, and even in terms of other variables associated, for instance, to congestion and so on, this is not good at all. It ends up by increasing the number of trips and the number of vehicle kilometers. That's one issue. Another example is what happens with the the fact that it's becoming easier and easier to organize a trip, a travel, a movement, and economists often warn us about the possible rebound effects that this can generate. Especially, there's a very heated debate, which I think we could continue to keep alive for the next centuries, about the concept of non-essential mobility. What is essential and what is non-essential, which clearly enters into something extremely touchy about freedom, individual liberty of choice, and so on. But is it a true threat that the ease of traveling, of planning, of moving around may generate some kind of rebound effect, and therefore increase a mobility which ultimately is not really essential for the for building up a sustainable community, sustainable society? And a third example I'd like to provocatively put forward is as a consequence of online shopping and online purchasing, etc. This hopefully and supposedly reduces the movements of people. They don't go to the shop anymore, but it increases substantially the number of movements for deliveries, for freight, with very often fragmented and parceled out trips, which are far from being optimized from the point of view of sustainability. So, are we really waiting for something which will happen in terms of the benefits expected from all these technological developments, or there's some sneaky and sometimes partly hidden undesired effect that we should be concerned about. Maybe Xavier, let me start with you this time.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Of course, there are benefits and there are non-benefits of it, because if we look at what you just said, just in time, the concept of just in time, like 20, 30 years ago, the industry is optimizing its assets, warehouse on wheels, and all those concepts. I would say it's an old concept, because the just in time still exists for the industry, but we have the new concept from the industry to the consumer. And this is not just in time, this is as fast as possible, because this is the delivery concept. You order online and it should arrive as fast as possible. Although most of the time you don't need this product very fast, but it's easier in a logistic chain to optimize and for everyone to have things going very fast. And you see that on Amazon or other platforms, the idea, if you order in the morning, you get it in the evening. It's not the day after, it's on the same day. And same day delivery requires a lot of optimization. And regarding what you said about the benefits, I think we should differentiate local and global benefits. I'll take an example. People in a city can get rid of their car, for example. Usually globally in Europe, a car costs around 500 to 600 euro per month, globally on average. Then those citizens get rid of their car and they use their bike and they take public transport and so on. So they will save money. Usually we say that people who do not own a car in a city will save approximately 40 to 50% of its transport expenses compared to owning and using a car. Then great, these people they're really sustainable because they use their bike and public transport. But so excellent local benefits, because no parking space is used, no public space is used for that car. But then they have some power and some purchasing power that they will use for traveling, taking the plane during the weekend, taking Flixbus for going there. And actually the local benefits are completely
buttoned out.
Well, buttoned on. And this is really what we see. And sometimes I want to provoke you as well. This is my time. It's better to be in a rural area and to take the car every morning than to be a citizen cyclist who takes the plane 10 times a year. And you see the trade-off is not really clear. And those people believe, I make so many efforts for the planet. No, not on a global scope is not good, but locally you're doing a good job. And I think this is very important. And we've seen the same with car sharing platforms. People were saying, okay, I'm using shared cars and so on. I don't own a car yet, but look at your carbon footprint globally. It's also, it's really huge.
Mm. Benjamin.
What I would like to pick as a lawyer, if you want, from a regulatory point of view, I think something important was mentioned in your questions and the way you presented the question. It's that people want to essentially exercise their freedom of movement. I want to take the plane to go to Rome or to go to Helsinki or to do city trips over the weekend just because I have the purchasing power to do so and technology allows. And there are also businesses making a lot of profits offering low-cost transportation, be it by bus or by plane. And this is all the exercise of fundamental freedoms. That's the conceptual framework we use in our societies and democracies. Not only, of course, for polluting a lot and letting people go to Rome on a city trip over the weekend, but for a lot of other aspects in the organization of society. So I believe the challenge behind those questions from a regulatory standpoint is how to address that issue of fundamental freedoms, individual freedoms, in a context where actually the exercise of these freedoms may not be the best decision for the common good again. So we need to accept, in my humble opinion, that if we want to reduce our carbon footprint globally, we will need to put some limitations to certain of these freedoms. The question is, of course, to what extent, how exactly, through which deliberation process are we going to make this acceptable? And these are all very broad questions, of course, but I just wanted to point at this conceptual framework of the freedoms. I believe is a very important element of all these questions.
Thank you. Let me pick. There's one question from participants, which is rather specific, but I think it's becoming a hot issue. So I'm pleased to put it forward to you. The question is about the impact of digitalization on local businesses. And on the, I would extend this to the livability of local areas and the pleasureness, I would say, the pleasurability of local areas in relation to the modification of how local shops and small businesses are present and operate and are visible. Can we try to look into this as well? Who would like to give it a try? Benjamin.
I'm not sure. What is the question? What is the impact of digitalization in local areas?
Yes.
Well, I would say, of course, there can be certain benefits, and it may allow, in individual cases, it may allow someone to order stuff online and have them delivered through a sustainable way, because it also exists. It may also be an opportunity to not to have to make certain trips or travels for administrative tasks or stuff like that. So it may be beneficial as a whole, but I think it's only in individual cases, and it's difficult to assess globally. And I think, Xavier, you mentioned the examples when addressing the question, that globally there may be, of course, a lot of downsides or counter effects to digitalization. I'm not sure that answers exactly the question, or you're expecting something else, Andrea.
No, it's okay. I don't know if Xavier wants to jump in as well on this one.
No, I think we can move. Okay. No, I think we can move on. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I like to be even more provocative than I've been so far. So the question I'd like to ask is, efficiency. Efficiency as a concept is typically seen as something with a positive value. It may be more or less important for different people, but certainly when you talk about being efficient, you would hardly find someone who say, no, I don't want to be efficient. There might be some, but not many. Now, my question is there something like good efficiency and bad efficiency? Should we revisit the very concept of efficiency to distinguish between efficiency, which serves purposes that are not immediately related to societal welfare and then to benefit for the collectivity because they are primarily directed to maximizing the advantage of a specific group, whether of individuals or of companies? Does it make sense to try and introduce this differentiation in the what lies behind the overall concept of efficiency? Or is it, a false question, a question that doesn't need to be asked? Xavier?
Could you? I lost the connection.
I'm trying to understand whether it would make sense to introduce the idea that efficiency may not be always a positive value, and therefore that there might be what I call a good efficiency as opposed to bad efficiency.
But yeah, we should first be able to describe the term efficiency. Is it efficiency in terms of speed? Is this efficiency in terms of social interactions? Is that efficiency in terms of energy recovery or energy reduction and so on? So this is the concept of efficiency. It depends from what's
Well, that's exactly the point. I mean, I think that efficiency so far has been considered primarily from the point of view, well, first of all, from a strict economic point of view, so doing more with the same amount of resources or using less resources to achieve the same result, or a combination of both, but it's a relationship between the resources you use, whether economic or other, and the results you get. The lower the ratio, the higher, depending how you put it, the highest the efficiency. Is this something which we are happy to live with, or should we extend the concept of efficiency, for instance, by taking a perspective which is not that of a specific economic process, but that of the welfare of society, and therefore unveil some aspects of the so-called efficiency, the traditional resource-based efficiency, that actually are not positive and not beneficial to society. That was the rationale behind my question.
Yes, definitely. I think we should extend, but even if we keep the concept of efficiency and financial or economic efficiency, if we take the example of public transport, and of course I'm a big defender of public transport, but we can look at the efficiency of such a system. Again, we should compare at different levels and at different distance. But if we look in a city, I have the impression that we sometimes overinvest in public transport, certainly for short distances. And actually a public transport network is not very resilient. We've seen that with the terrorist attacks. We've seen that with the floods or the hurricane in New York last week. We've seen that with the pandemic. We've seen that with energy crisis and so on. So this is the backbone of our mobility system somehow, but it's not that resilient. And I think we should keep this efficiency and resilience in mind, and active mobility at city level. And when I mean city is around 25, 30 kilometers, is really important to make sure that the system is efficient, because we spend a lot of resource, human and financial resource, in public transport. But in many cases, we'd better try to move to active mobility, which is per se more efficient in that sense. This is, again, my humble opinion on this.
So what you're saying is that we should be careful about applying the efficiency concept to the system as a whole, and not to specific segments of the system, because that is the risk. Benjamin, would you like to comment on this?
No, I think I would agree that it depends how you measure efficiency, indeed. If you take a purely economic approach, comparing the resources and the results, but I would totally agree that there's a campaign in Brussels to encourage people to just go buy food where they can, and this is highly efficient. I mean, you take your feet; they are always available, right at the bottom of your legs, and you put one foot before the other, and you will see that you keep moving, and you go where you have to go.
There was a very nice clip which circulated some time ago about the role of the feet. But you know, I mean, efficiency, for instance, speed is a typical in the transport sector. Speed is a typical indicator to measure what people perceive as efficiency. So as you were saying before, speed is still. We're discussing about just in time, and I said the real issue is speed, because that's what people want. If I'm asking the question about good and bad efficiencies, precisely because I'd like to understand whether we should question this. I mean, whether it would make sense to say, well, yes, of course, today speed is ingrained in people's culture and mind as an absolute measure of something positive. Let's call it efficiency or something else. Does it lead us in the wrong direction? I mean, sure, because if that is the case, then we have a lot of work to do upstream on the culture, and that's precisely what our project is interested in trying to understand this kind of work, not the immediate measures that a given government might take to improve or enhance a specific service. Xavier, I think you're burning to ask.
Yes, because actually speed is a behavior, but the goal is time. So it's a mean. I mean, speed is a mean. I want to go fast to save time in my journey, in my day in my day. I think the real efficiency is usable time. Because if we talk in terms of usable time, I take public transport. Okay, it's a bit longer, maybe 30% longer than taking a car, but I can use my time. I can sleep, I can read, I can work, I can talk to people. Then it's a usable time. It's the same with when walking or biking. I don't need to go to the fitness center because I've done two things at the same time: health and travel. And this is the concept of usable time is important. And then again, I think that digitalization is really powerful because there were things that were impossible in the past. It would not have been possible to have that kind of pandemic and COVID-19 crisis without digital tools, because we would have been all at home doing nothing. No, this time it was possible to work remotely. It's possible to work when you waiting for the bus or to give a phone call, etc. And I think through digitalization we should rethink about the question of time. And no one is flying on a Concorde anymore, because actually the value of time has reduced. Because of course there was a crash, but actually, okay, yes, I need to go to New York, but maybe I don't need to go to New York. This is the first thing. And then if I go back, okay, it takes me 2 or 3 more hours, but I can work during my flight. So you see, things have changed through the concept, thanks to the concept of usable time. And speed is not for me the good indicator, the only good indicator.
Okay, this actually leads me quite nicely to what was my next question, because you already mentioned en passant pandemics, and this is, I think it's difficult to organize a debate on whatever topic these days without at some point, you know, putting pandemics on the table. So I think we have to do that, and especially because there are some very visible things that are happening in terms of changing behavioral patterns and mobility patterns, both for goods with you know, online shopping and the explosion of home deliveries and so on, and for passengers, and particularly for people who work in offices with the so-called smart working. I hate this expression, incidentally, but I mean, that's what people tend to call it. So both these things were, yes, a reaction to pandemics but were only possible and strongly facilitated, made possible by digitalization. So the obvious question is, are these changes likely to be somehow sustained when pandemics hopefully is under control, and who is going to be the main player in making it permanent or rather transitory? Because, you know, there are other aspects, like people now with the pandemics have developed kind of a fear of crowded spaces. Again, is this something which we can expect to be permanent, or at the end of the day, will people be unwilling to give up the social benefits, the pleasurability of traveling with other people and meeting other people and having mobility services that allow them to actually interact and with more conviviality? This is an issue which is probably too early to observe something which can be interpreted as stabilized, but that's precisely why I'm asking the question now, because we have for instance, the example of the incredible diffusion of social networks and of people interacting on social networks, which brings with it, obvious to me at least, disbenefits in terms of loss of privacy, in terms of a number of other risks, and of you know, the Big Brother effect. So are people prepared to give up these values because they are afraid of meeting in crowded space or traveling with others? Are they ready to give up the positive aspects of social interaction, which transport contributes? It's obviously not the main contributor, but it is a contributor. so that's my question, which is, I know, a difficult one to answer with certainties because it's too early to observe, but I'd like to pick your brains on this. Benjamin, would like to take this up?
Yes, my impression is with pandemics, people working from home, they have come to realize that indeed technology is a great enabler, as the capacity to empower people to better make decisions about their organization. Instead of being a commuter in the morning, commuter in the evening, they can master their time, their family time, the organization of the household, whatever. And I believe that at least to some extent, this is a trend that will remain, and it's probably what's driving a lot of companies and organizations towards deciding on new policies for home working. How many days per week will you be supposed to come to the office or to stay at home? What will be the flexibility in that regard? I think in certain sectors there starts to be a competition towards to attract talents to offer more flexibility, and there can be a sort of a race to the top of or the bottom of home working, whatever you prefer. So I think this is a practical consequence, in my opinion, is there to stay, at least in some way, because that's something people have experienced for a number of months. They have experienced that in their private and family life. It has practical implications for them. Some people have been able, for the first time in their busy professional life, to spend a bit of time with their children at home, instead of coming back very late every day, or for some others it's different, but I believe it has an impact on life of people, and not only on economic or financial components of their lives. So I believe, because we discussed a bit before, that there are so many hidden drivers actually behind the mobility behavior of people, and I think this is a testimony to that.
Okay, but what about the specific aspect related to the inevitable implication of having to share personal data with others, or even with everybody, if one wants to make the most of these new services? Is this something which people are prepared to give up? The fear of losing their own privacy and to being vulnerable because of excessive sharing of their personal data. Is this a value? Is this something which is a value, or are values changing and people would consider this is a minor evil when compared with all the fantastic benefits of digital applications?
If I may,
yes, I was replying to you.
On the one hand, I was going to say, initial reaction, people will share any kind of personal data you are able, or a company is able to ask them to share in a smart way. So if they offer a benefit like a cool app for the young people, or even for the older people, they will share the data. They don't care. I mean, people have not waited for the pandemics before sharing all the data to Facebook or WhatsApp or other companies before. So I don't think that's the concern of people. Am I sharing too much data? After all, personal data is also very much a legal concept that we use to try and put some boundaries to the powers of these internet platforms and other companies. So people don't think and don't react in function of legal concepts in their lives, even lawyers, to be honest. On the other hand, I believe there is also more awareness these days of the importance of privacy. And of course, we all could see so many pictures and videos of people being spied on or caught in their very personal spaces during professional video conferences with the kids passing by or whatever. So I believe there is more awareness about the interest of seclusion and of being kept from external, to be protected against intrusion generally. But this is only a nuance to the first part of my answer. I believe that people don't really care a lot about sharing their personal. It's always been called a privacy paradox. Against a bit of content, against a bit of fun, people share already so much data.
Xavier, would you agree with that? This and the previous intervention from Benjamin.
Yes, I do agree that most people don't care about their data. I mean, they say they care, but actually they don't care. They don't realize actually what people and what companies can do. But to be honest, of course, I want to respect privacy. But at the same time, I'm doing a lot of studies for public transport authorities, public transport operators, and we need data to base our analysis on facts, on real good understanding of mobility behaviors. And in the past, we could only rely on surveys at company level and maybe at school level. But this is not mobility. This is just a very small and tiny part of the mobility. And since 10 years, for 10 years now, we are using a lot of big data with companies like Google, TomTom, telco companies, and so on. And this is really important to have those data. And if we don't have them, others do, because Google knows much better, way better than any public transport operator on earth what's happening. And it is very dangerous, because such company, and it's not the devil, of course not, because I think they're clever than many other industries on this planet, but actually they know how people behave, they know how they travel, they know why they travel, at what time, they will know what they pay if they go to a restaurant or a shop and anything with using Apple Pay and Google Pay. And this is important for managing transport systems in the future. Certainly, if we have like robotaxis and those kind of things, it's not for tomorrow, it's for after tomorrow. But this is a key point. And this is difficult to say, okay, no, we should not have personal data and we should not track people. But at the same time, we have those big companies having those data. And so we should find the right option, because as transport planners, as public authorities, we need to know how people behave to make good decisions. And we need to know how people behave and travel to monitor the effects of what we've done. Like, you build a new tram line, you must be able to say, yeah, it had an impact. Most of the time you say it had an impact because it's crowded. No, it doesn't say anything. It's just that it's crowded, but maybe the buses are empty. It doesn't say that the system was efficient. It's just that your tram is crowded. And those data are really important. It's like a loop. You decide something, you plan something, you act, you build something, and then retroact. You need to say, and that's why I think in the mobility sector, I'm not talking about Facebook or other things, in the mobility sector, I think personal data and tracking people, we need to respect privacy. It should be bundled data, of course, but it's very important if we want to make sure that our policies are efficient and useful.
Thank you. Yes, actually, you mentioned Facebook. I was about to quote a quip that I heard from somebody lately, which said that Facebook is the only private club whose membership is compulsory. Which seems like an oxymoron or a contradiction in terms. So what you're saying, Xavier, is that we shouldn't worry about this kind of problem when we talk about mobility apps. It's still a voluntary thing, and you can do without. But of course, it's not in your interest. We're very close to the private club with compulsory membership. Huh? No?
No. What I'm saying is that there's a big battle. There's a big fight between public interest, who wants to respect privacy, but at the same time, those same public bodies, they need those data. And you see, it's not black and white. It's not, oh yeah, Google is tracking people and knows everything. We would love to know everything, for mobility, for transport planning, I'm not saying I don't care what people do, but for mobility, transport planning, it's very, very useful, because for decades, we invested in transport systems that are not, that do not answer to the real needs of people. Yes, build a new metro line. No, this is not exactly where people want to go. We should, and this is, I'd like to remind this that it's not, those data are very valuable, not only for commercial purpose, also for public interest. But yeah, the barrier is really tight, and this is why. But we're losing the game for the moment, because yeah, Google has the model share per street. Per street, we don't have it in Brussels at regional level. We don't have it. Google has it per street. So you see the difference.
Anything to add, Benjamin, to that?
No, I think this is a very good illustration of the challenge to regulate personal data and the processing of personal data. Because of course, it's all about the purpose that you are pursuing with the data. If you are acting for the common good, there's no problem. But if you start reusing the data for a different purpose, or somebody else starts doing the same for a less common good related purpose, then we can be into trouble. So I think the only answer we have to that question at this stage is really in terms of the process that we are supposed to use, I would say, in order to open certain gates or close certain gates. What I'm talking about is, normally the rules are for private companies. If they want to use the data, one of the possibilities is to have consent of people. But as I said, it's very easy to get the consent by using dark patterns, or even without that, it's easy to get a consent if you offer something free that looks interesting or nice and or trendy, some content, some video, whatever. You get the consent. So it's actually a meaningless consent, in my opinion. We need to maybe think about whether it is a workable system. Then there is the use of data by the public bodies. Here, the theory is that there should be a law stating what is permitted, what is not permitted. But we saw with the pandemics also that, at least in Belgium, that there's a clear delay, or there is a clear failure of government to just be able to deliberate correctly about the use of data and put that in a document that we call a law or a statute, and that explains in plain terms what is acceptable from a common good perspective. Because I have no problem admitting that using mobility data is essential for the efficient management of public transportation system. I'm fully advocating that. I'm fully convinced. But it needs to be put black on white in a document that we call the law, that is supposed to be decided by the lawmakers, by those who are elected by the people. If this is done in a transparent way, at least there is some control that can be exercised over the lawmakers. We can vote for different people the next time, or we can express our opposition if we disagree with the position that they have taken. That's how it should work, but it doesn't really work that way, at least not such so ideally.
But let me ask you one question. You talk about the failure of government. We have been mentioning surveys as a tool to understand what people want. You both, in fact, seem to believe that we know enough about what people aspire to and what are the real needs and aspiration of people. Is that correct? Do I misunderstand you? Or because you seem to concentrate on the goal of giving to people what they expect, but are we really knowledgeable about what people deeply aspire to? Or should we somehow go a little bit back to the drawing board and try to make sure that when we interpret what we believe to be people's aspiration, we are actually doing the right thing. It connects also to the issue of time, usable time, speed we were discussing before. Are these absolute values? Can we rely on a consensus, social consensus? Difficult question, huh? Xavier?
But I'm not sure I understand the question.
No, Benjamin, go on.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I believe personally that if there is a democratic process and a law is enacted, then I'm happy in the sense that I believe this is something that represents what we should be doing. That's what I was explaining about the deliberation process to decide on, for instance, can we use the mobility data for public transportation? This by no means assumes that we know the individual aspirations of people. We don't know, and maybe we don't have to know that. It's something private. So I'm not sure I understand the implication you're making about whether we believe that we know what people want. I don't know what people want. Sometimes it's hard for me to know what I want. So from an individual point of view, I do not know what people want, and I think, of course, we can only think about in a general way what we can try to offer as an efficient public transportation service, for instance. But some people will take it, some won't, because they want something else. Sometimes people want the speed just for the sake of the speed, because they like to go fast on the speedway.
Yes, I wanted to add something to give an example, because actually from a legal point of view it's very difficult. Either you regulate too early, and then you kill the innovation directly, because it has no time to prove whether it's efficient, useful or not. Either you regulate too late, and then it's too late because it has become a monster. And if I give an example in the mobility sector, for decades we want to promote carpooling in companies. And carpooling is a very simple concept. Two people living in the same vicinity, in the same neighborhood, or same region, can travel all together in the same car. Simple, efficient, one car for 2-3 people. But we may not ask in a company where people live, because from a privacy perspective, we cannot. And maybe that person has said that he is living there, but actually no, because he's separated. But I mean, the human resources do not have to know that. So this is normal that based on privacy concerns, we don't know this information. But it would be very useful, because in that case, we would be able to do direct marketing, saying, okay, Joe, you could come with Karen, and it would be very efficient for you, and we can incentivize you. But we may not. And you see, and it's for the public interest. But those are the kind of thing we cannot. And many startups in the carpool sector, but it can be in any mobility sector, either they come too early, and then the regulation comes too early, and then they cannot develop because they had no time to prove they could change something, and they could change the behaviors. Either you have companies like Uber, like maybe kick scooters and so on, and the regulation comes too late because people embrace the system, those kick scooters parked everywhere on public space, but it's very difficult to regulate because people want to use them. They're really happy using them. But you have the problem of public space design, and you have the problem of there are really bad benefits of this. You see that regulation is a tricky thing, because you never know and usually law is slow. And this
But I think one of the challenges that we have in the Rebalance project altogether is to understand what is. I mean, we're using a lot the term, the fashionable term of nudging, nudging being something which is somehow in between regulation and total absence of regulation. So the finding the right balance is certainly not an easy job. I have a question which relates a little bit to motivations from one of the participants.
Sorry, Andrea, can you just adjust the mic, because it's no longer.
I'm sorry. Is that any better now? Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, the question is, speed is also fun. e-scooter male users sometimes refer to fun in movement as an attracting feature. Not useful, but simply fun.
This is true.
That was, I think, I take this up because I think it was a very concrete, good example of what I meant by asking ourselves whether we are fully familiar and confident about our understanding of what people want and what people expect. We have to some extent not completely go back to the drawing board, but certainly make sure that we are actually confident about our understanding what people expect. I think it's important. And this leads me to my further question, which is also something which one of the participants has raised, but I had already in mind to put it forward. Another of the buzzwords is people-centered mobility transition, right? So shaping and designing and improving the mobility system in such a way that it is people-centered, for whatever that means. So clearly, there's a variety of digitally enabled solutions, and particularly mobility as a service, but also everything that has to do with transport on demand, but also, you know, journey planning apps, electronic ticketing, all these things can clearly be related to the ambition of putting people at the center, individual specific needs at the center. My question is, can this be somehow threatened by, in its effectiveness, by the problem of the digital divide? Which may disappear maybe in 2 or 3 generations, but don't think it will disappear before then. So will it actually, you know, leave some groups behind, like vulnerable people, but the people who are elderly, also those who are not technology savvy and don't want to be technology savvy, but also other groups like, you know, rural population who is certainly less has less access and accessibility, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of socioeconomic and cultural status. The other more optimistic side of the coin would be to say that no, this is not true, because making it easier and cheaper to travel and to connect and to move around, this is a pathway towards inclusivity. So we shouldn't worry about digital divide, at least not in the medium term. What do you think about this? I mean, is this something which reveals kind of a misalignment between planners on one hand, industry on the other, and society on the third level, or is it a false problem? Xavier?
Yes, maybe. Personally, I think that the digital gap will not disappear, because of course, probably 80–85% of the European population has a smartphone now. But it's not because you have a smartphone that you use it as a smartphone. Many people don't use many apps, and they just use it, maybe look at the emails and so on, but they are not able to use complicated apps like journey planners and so on. And this is now, but in 5 times we will use augmented reality and then virtual reality and so on. So it goes so fast that that digital gap, and myself, so in a few years I will be outdated completely, because I cannot follow those trends, although I'm making the best, but will be completely outdated in that field. So it will remain, and therefore I'd just like to show just one image here, because I have the impression that the mass concept is so focusing on digital, but no, mass means mobility as a service. And the service has nothing to do with digitalization. It's part of it. It's a mean, it's a tool, but it should be inclusive, meaning it should embrace, I mean, it should be adapted to anyone. And it can be through the phone. It can be at a desk. It can be anything. It should be physical, because when your app is saying, okay, take a shared car out of the station, great. And then you go out of the station and you don't see where it is, because physically it's not a service. You have to find it in some of the streets nearby because it's a free floating system and you don't know. So we should, I mean, Line should try to assemble the digital and the physical world. So the digital world, it should be also financial, because people want to make sure that they don't pay more when they take public transport, a share car, a quick scooter, than if they would have taken their car, or I mean, it should be bundled, it should be it should be limited, and make sure that if you take the bus sometimes, it will not cost you more than if you have a season ticket, for example. And then human mobility as a service is human. We need humans. I said it from the very beginning. The only for me, the only goal of digitalization is to save stupid. I mean, to avoid to spend resources in a stupid way. But then we need to focus our development on humans and have mobility boutiques and have people who can help those people with this digital gap. And this is really what I strongly believe. And if we work in this way, maybe we can avoid a huge digital gap. If we don't do so, I'm sure it will happen even more than today.
So we've got some hopes, but no illusions.
No illusions, never, never. We're not here for illusions.
Benjamin, what is your take on this?
Oh, my take is quite simple. I think if we select technology to be people-centric, I'm not sure it's the right way. We can also try people to be people-centric. But of course, for some people, having a smartphone and the existence of innovative apps and all that it can work, it can make transportation more efficient, of course. But I guess the question of inclusion, it's about the access cost in total, and you have to look at it the way Xavier described, I believe. So, but I think, again, I'm sticking to my introduction that technology and digitalization is a tool, or it should remain a tool. If we take it for more than that, then we allow people to make a lot of profit out of it, which is in itself not a problem. But if the profit of private companies comes at the cost of the common good, then we may want to remedy or to fix at least some part of that.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I had another question, which in fact I wanted to raise earlier, but I somehow forgot. I think when we talked about, privacy, Big Brother, etc., there's also a very concrete element of potential concern, which is, will we witness in the digital mobility services a phenomenon which is similar to what we are witnessing in other digital areas where there are quasi-monopolistic positions of a very limited number of big players, which independently of the economic consequences of this competition, etc. I'm mainly referring to the implications of this kind of situation on ethics, again, on potential manipulation, on potential drawbacks from the personal individual point of view. Are we heading for this kind of risk also as what concern mobility services, or is the picture different, and why would it be different? Who wants to try to address this? Xavier?
Yes, I can. My personal opinion, it's too late. Google as well. It's too late. In Europe, 85% of citizens use Google Maps. And public transport providers, they are starting with mass apps, and they've done an excellent job. I mean, you have Berlin, you have Helsinki, you have even in Brussels, they now started a mass app, a pilot, but it's really good. It works perfectly. No one uses it. Why? Because they have no critical mass of users. Google is on every smartphone, Google is everywhere in our life, and they have a base of huge critical mass of users. And so they gain a return of experience, and they can adapt. And Benjamin was saying, yeah, we need to believe what the app is saying. Look at Google Maps when using it as a car driver. It will tell you this is still the best journey, despite the fact that there are more traffic jams than usual. And this little sentence costs millions. cost millions because they understood that it's really important to make people feel confident actually in the app. So for me, it will really be in the transport sector, it's going to be very difficult to fight against this power.
Not a bright picture, huh? Benjamin.
I think it's a documented thing that in many sectors, and I don't believe that transportation is an exception, with technology, there is a winner-takes-all effect and some other network effects, which cause indeed companies to become quickly gatekeepers, as we call them these days. It's the latest word in the attempt to regulate this situation. So I see no reason why transportation would be different. It's the same in many other sectors.
And there's no way government nudges can try to change the situation.
They should.
Yes,
but
it's indeed quite a challenge.
But not at a local, not at a regional, not at a national, maybe at European level. But it's no way. I mean, we're developing mass applications for every city, every region in Europe. It's a nonsense. It's a nonsense. We should have just one technology, but it's impossible, of course, because every country wants the best startups and so on. So it's impossible. So we have lots of apps that no one uses, and Google Maps takes it all. Takes all. So that's it, and it's going to be very difficult. And what I fear, this is the first layer. The first layer was information. The next layer is booking. Then it's payment. And then it's the retroact that Google will tell governments, we know what bus line you should build or you should operate now. And actually, public transport operators and mobility providers, they will lose the contacts with their clients because everything will be managed through the platform, exactly the same way as Booking.com gives what's the, I mean, you never have contacts with the hotel. You just stay in the Booking.com world, which is not true anymore because people realize that it was way cheaper to contact the hotel directly. Yeah. But most of the time, by convenience, okay, look at Booking.com.
I think in the short and medium term, this is true. On the longer term, if you look at history, I think you see that there is some pendulum effect. And
I hope so.
Yeah. Europe
so,
and the US are looking at ways to potentially better rein in and regulate those big GAFA monopolies. So not every hope is lost.
Okay, let's keep our hopes open.
We should accelerate.
Okay, so let me ask my last question, or rather ask you to share with us some kind of, summary. Rebalance is not supposed to come up with specific recommendations to policies or to governments to do A, B, or C, but of course, we would like to help in understanding which areas are the critical ones and which areas of those that are critical are amenable to public or other intervention. So my question here would be beyond purely technological aspects, because we are not here to discuss technology. We trust those who develop it to do their best. But beyond the technological aspects, so what factors could actually hinder the success of the adoption of digital solutions? And maybe you could try to phrase your answer by answering very concretely which are the three cultural or value-based factors that would prove the most critical for the successful development of digital solutions in the transport sector. So, Benjamin, you would like to start?
I'm not sure I would like to start, but you give me the word. So I'm not sure I can come up with three cultural factors. I believe that from the conversation we had, what would be important is for people to better understand what is at stake with mobility. I think a lot of people do not even realize the many challenges that we've been discussing in terms of mobility from a common good perspective. And it may be interesting to let them understand that, governments are facing these challenges and they are trying to achieve these types of goals typically. So I think awareness can be an important factor in the adoption of certain solutions. I would also say that maybe this is a bit a paradox based on the discussion we just had with the monopoly of Google and etc. and everybody using Google Maps or Waze. But I think diversity, generally speaking, and openness and interoperability, I believe, is a value that people like and that they find important. And I would say, maybe I'm being very naive, but I would say that a policy that really is based on that, in my view, would have better chances to perform well, because it would be better and better accepted by public opinions. But maybe I'm being very naive.
So may I interpret this discussion on diversity as the possibility that people would have to actually opt in or opt out and to have a choice? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I think people from Brussels or people from Barcelona, they would always give more confidence and trust to an app that is developed and built in Barcelona or in Brussels. If I live in Brussels, I'm not sure I would trust people from Barcelona to tell me where I should go or how I should go there. That's what I mean. It's important, of course, to understand that we could save efforts and cost if we have one single technology working for throughout Europe. But in the same time, I think we in Europe tend to believe that, yeah, we also like our vicinity, as you mentioned. We like the local aspects, and we shouldn't lose the sense of that. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you. Xavier, your selection.
Yes, thank you. It was easier for me. I had some more time, so I could put all my thoughts all together. So I'll share my screen because, and thanks to Benjamin, because he inspired me. But I want to build on what he said. Actually, digitalization is new, but technology is not something new. If we look at tram systems in Europe, so we had trams a century ago, then there's been dismantled all over Europe. And then back in the 80s, some French cities and other cities said, okay, let's have the tram back in our city. And then what happened? No standardization at all. Every city wanted a specific tram with a low flow or high flow and with a specific design and so on. It cost a lot of money and it was impossible to manage. And most of the time, actually, it was a design process, but they would never ask the citizens what they wanted. So it was not adapted for wheelchairs. The people, for example, in the Netherlands were tall, but the metro was too small for those people, because we know that in the Netherlands, people tend to get taller and taller. So my 3 keywords would be real experimentation. Don't talk too much about technology, test it. This is the power of Uber. When Uber started 10 years ago or 12 years ago, actually the app was a crap. It was a crap, but they tested and they improved and they improved. What we have usually, we design the best technology and we take 3 years for launching the systems and then we put it on the market. No, test a crappy app and then look at what people say. Maybe it's crappy, but they will say, this is a very interesting feature. The second keyword is group and diversity. It's been mentioned by Benjamin about the diversity, but I would focus on the group aspects. No journey planner on Earth is taking the group consideration. What do I mean by group? We are social humans. I mean, we humans, we're social human beings. We are not always traveling alone. We're with the family, with kids, with the wife, with the husband. We're a group of colleagues and so on. the journey planner is always meant as I'm traveling alone. But no, if we're 5 people or a family, it's no way saying, okay, take a shared bike. I will not be able to find 5 shared bikes at the same place. So I think it's really important to think in terms also, of course, you need to give individual information, but it should be also available for group and for diversity, because some people from the diverse communities, they have specific needs and specific concerns. And the last one is to gain time against those big players, big tech players, replicate and duplicate. Because we're trying so many pilot projects in Europe. Horizon 2020, yes, great. 25 projects about everything, every time the same. No, take one technology and do exactly the same and replicate, duplicate, and try the same thing to see if it works in Italy, is it going to work in the Netherlands, in UK, and so on. And this is what I would say. And it has nothing to do with technology, it's just efficiency.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, I guess there's a thread through these 3, or at least through the first and the third, which, I mean, at the risk of trivializing a little bit your intervention, I think the key word is trust, building trust. You build trust by demonstrating, build trust by ensuring that it is properly shared. So I would like to, you know, use also this trust buzzword to interpret what you're saying.
Yes, you're right.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We still have in principle 3 or 4 minutes. So if one of you wants to have a last short intervention to express something that you feel like you didn't have the chance to do, you're welcome to do that. Yeah, otherwise we'll say goodbye to each other. So anything, any last minute nugget from one or both of you?
Maybe there was one question that was not answered about the means of payment. Someone asked that question. Yes, it's part of the, it's the second or third layer. In mobility as a service system, payment should be seamless. And once again, this was the power of Uber. You don't have to negotiate the price with the taxi driver. And it's part of the psychological barriers that help using a system. You don't have to negotiate. It was clear. It's charged on the credit card. So this kind of little things are really important, because people, they don't know who to buy a ticket. They don't know what ticket they need to buy. And those in smart payments, intelligent payments, nothing to do payments, I would call them, are really important.
Thank you, Xavier. Benjamin, is that?
No, I just would like to thank you for the invitation and say that I was caught and very much interested by the approach of the project to understand those values that are driving the behavior of people, in addition to really the economic and technological components.
Thank you. Yes, I think that I have to thank both of you for your time and your very stimulating discussion. I think we still have a lot of room for further digging into this value and cultural aspects. We're scrapping the surface, but we have the very forceful intention of going a little bit deeper. So let's keep up with this challenge and the pathway, and this allows me to again invite all of you to our next dialogues. It's very easy, every Thursday for the next 3 more weeks, always at 4 o'clock with different themes. Next one will be primarily on greening aspects and then signals, concrete signals, and what is behind those signals in moving towards greener choices. So you're all welcome to join us again next Thursday. And in the meantime, thanks to everybody, in particular to our 2 panelists.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was very interesting. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Andrea.
Okay, have a good evening to all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.